A webinar with slides. On-screen text. Questions/comments. Share questions and comments in the Q&A window. Questions will be reviewed during the moderated Q&A period. Closed captioning. https://bit.ly/3rbqskn. Zoom technical support. +1 888 799 9666 extension 2 or support.zoom.us/hc/nus. Feedback. Let us know what you thought of this presentation. https://bit.ly/3hxkd3c. Join the conversation at Ncats_NIH_gov. #Ncasper. Logo, Ncats.
Welcome everyone. This webinar will begin shortly. Before we get started, we want to go over a few tips on how to engage with us. We want to make this an interactive session. So please feel free to drop in your questions using the Q&A feature that's on the bottom of your screen. I also want to encourage you to open your chat window, and that will just appear on the right side. We'll be sharing some links that are helpful resources for you. You can also note that you can save your chat if you have the latest version of Zoom. We will also send some of these links to you in a follow-up email. This webinar is being recorded, and we will make the presentation available to you. We are offering closed captioning as well as Zoom technical support. Your feedback is vital to us. We want to know what you think. How did this help support your efforts? What should we do differently next time? If you would please click on the link that's in chat and open up that feedback form. We'd really value 100% participation if we can get input from you on how we did today. Also, join the conversation online. Please follow us on our Ncats NIH.gov and use Ncats SBIR hashtag. Next slide, please.
February 24, 2022. Ncats.nih.gov/smallbusiness.
With that, I'd like to officially welcome you to our presentation today, Peer Review for Small Business Funding, an overview of the process.
Featured speakers. Headshots of the two speakers and Monique Larocque, M.P.H. Senior Vice President, Ogilvy Health, FKH.
Today, we're joined by our esteemed guest, Dr. Alan Richon. He is an expert on scientific review and is from our Center for Scientific Review at the National Institute of Health. And Dr. Meena Rajagopal. She's a program officer at the Office of Strategic Alliances at Ncats NIH. My name is Monique Larocque, and I'll be the moderator for today.
Agenda. Welcome, introductions, and overview.
To give you an overview of what we're going to cover, we're going to briefly talk about the Ncats SBIR and STTR program, looking specifically at the program overview, as well as various opportunities and resources and upcoming funding opportunities. And then we're going to do a deeper dive into the peer review process, including how we select reviewers and how the SBIR and STTR applications are reviewed. And then we'll have a moderated Q&A. Please use the chat or Q&A function to submit questions, preferably the Q&A function. And you can see a little diagram of that at the bottom of the screen where you can click on Q&A. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Meena.
Thanks, Monique. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Can we go to the next slide, please?
What does the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences Open Brace Ncats Close Brace do? Ncats focuses on what is common across diseases and the translational process. Translation is the process of turning observations in the laboratory, clinic and community into interventions that improve the health of individuals and the public, from diagnostics and therapeutics and behavioral changes. Translational science is the field of investigation focused on understanding the scientific and operational principles underlying each step of the translational process.
I'm very happy to have Dr. Alan Richon from the Center for Scientific Review to talk about how the peer review process, particularly for the SBIR STTR grants, work here at the NIH. But before I hand it over to him, I would like to very quickly go over the small business program at Ncats. So Ncats stands for National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, and it is one of the 27 institutes here at the NIH. We promote research to identify and mitigate bottlenecks in translational science pipeline so that more treatment options are available to more patients more rapidly. Towards this, we have a number of initiatives, but for the purposes of today's talk, I'm going to just talk about the small business program. Can we go to the next slide, please?
2021 NIH budget for basic and applied biomedical sciences $41.68 billion. 2021 NIH funds for small businesses open brace SBIR and STTR close brace is $1.0356 billion.
So to quickly give an overview of the small business program, the SBIR, which stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR, which is Small Business Technology Transfer Research Programs, are also known as America's Seed Fund, and it is one of the largest sources of early stage funding available for small businesses research and development. This is a congressionally mandated program, and other federal agencies participate in, including the CDC and the NSF, and of course the NIH. The budget for the small business program tracks the agency's budget, and what this means is that here at NIH, it is about 3.65% of the agency's budget that amounts to about $1 billion set aside just for the small business program. And I just want to add an additional information with you, share with you that a lion's share of this budget goes towards funding the small SBIR program. This is not to mean that the NIH prefers the SBIR over STTR, definitely not. This is just how the Congress has mandated where the majority of the funds should go. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Not alone. Funds don't have to be repaid.
So there are multiple benefits applying to the small business program, right? So first of all, like I said, the budget for this program tracks the agency's budget. So the funding is stable and predictable. Second of all, it is non-dilutive, meaning the IP rights belong to the small business. And once awarded, the small businesses can then leverage other programs within the NIH, like the technical and business assistance and I-Corps programs, and also request for supplemental funding to further develop and commercialize the technology. But one of the biggest advantages of applying to the small business program here at the NIH is the topic of today's webinar event, which is peer review process. So every SBIR and STTR grant goes through a rigorous peer review process, which then the small business can leverage to go outside of the NIH looking for other funding opportunities and collaboration potential. So that is one of the biggest advantages to applying for the small business program at NIH. Because guess what? Now your work has been validated by the National Institutes of Health. Next slide, please. In this slide, I just wanted to quickly touch upon the key differences between the two programs. First of all, under the SBIR, the small business is allowed to partner up with a nonprofit research institute. However, this is a mandatory requirement under STTR programs. So in other words, if you are applying under the STTR program, the small business has to collaborate with a nonprofit research institute in the United States, be it a college or a university or other federally funded research and development center, what we call the FFRDC, excuse me. And the next difference comes with the primary employment of the principal investigator. So under the SBIR program, the primary employment for the principal investigator has to be with the small business. However, there is some flexibility under the STTR program. The primary employment of the principal investigator can be either with the small business or the nonprofit research institute. There are also other guidelines that, with regards to work requirement that differentiates between these two programs. For instance, under the SBIR program, a small business can outsource up to about 33% under phase 1 and up to about 50% under phase 2. Under the STTR program, there is a minimum work requirement that is required, and at least about 40% of the work must be carried out at the small business, and at a minimum of 30% of the proposed work must be carried out at the research institute. But the key takeaway from this slide is the line at the very bottom, which says that, no matter which program that you apply under, the SBIR or the STTR, the award or the money always goes to the small business. Next slide, please.
Translational science and research areas of interest. SBIR and STTR programs support Ncats' mission to transform the translational science process so that new treatments and cures for disease can be delivered to patients more efficiently. 2022 to 2023 deadlines, April 5th, September 5th, January 5th.
So like I mentioned earlier, Ncats promotes research on projects and technologies and methodologies that have a translational impact. And this broadly falls into three buckets. One, the preclinical drug discovery and development. Two, biomedical, clinical, and health research informatics. And three, clinical dissemination and implementation research. I'm not going to get into each of these topics, but I would strongly urge you to please go to our website and read what is included under each topic. And if you have any specific questions, please reach out to us and I will be more than happy to answer your questions. Next slide, please.
Funding overview. The Small Business Innovation Research Open Brace SBIR Close Brace and Small Business Technology Transfer Open Brace STTR Close Brace programs are some of the largest sources of early-stage capital for innovative small companies in the United States. These programs allow you, as owned and operated small businesses, to engage in federal research and development open brace R&D close brace that has a strong potential for commercialization.
So at Ncats, we have a number of funding opportunities for small businesses. And by this, I mean the investigator-initiated omnibus solicitation, targeted grant solicitation, and contract solicitation. However, a majority of our applications comes through the omnibus solicitation. The deadlines for the omnibus solicitation are pretty standard. It's like mentioned in the slide, April 5th, September 5th, and January 5th. And for the targeted grant solicitations, the deadlines usually track the omnibus solicitation, but sometimes depending on the topic, it could vary. So I would strongly encourage you to please visit our website again and familiarize yourself with the targeted grant solicitations. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And then once a year, we have what's called the contract solicitation. And this is typically around October, November timeframe. And since this is a contractual agreement, there are deliverables that have to be met. Next slide, please.
Phase 1. Discovery. 2. Development. 3. Commercialization.
So the Small Business Program at the NIH is a three-phase program. And please be advised that this need not be confused with the phases involved in a clinical trial. This is definitely different. So under phase 1, we are looking for grant proposals that talk about a feasibility study where you have preliminary data for a proof of concept, and you could request up to about $276K for a period of, say, anywhere from 6 months to a year. We do have some topics, and if you would wish to apply under one of those waiver topics, you could request up to about $325K. And we have the phase 2, which is a more full-fledged R&D.
$1,838,436 for SBIR and STTR, over 2 years open brace, $2 million close brace.
So we strongly urge that your grant proposal has a commercialization plan in place. And there are two funding mechanisms under the phase 2, the direct to phase 2 and fast track. And under the fast track, you're basically combining the phase 1 and the phase 2. So an applicant requests for a phase 2 funding, but contingent upon meeting the phase 1 milestones, the award is being made. And while in the direct to phase 2, like the name suggests, you skip phase 1, so you directly go to the phase 2. And this is in cases where you are very comfortable with your preliminary data that you wanted to apply to the next level. There are some differences when it comes to peer review process between these two grant mechanisms, but I will let Dr. Alan Richon to talk about that. We also have what is called the phase 2B, and not all institutes of the NIH participate in this program. However, Ncats currently does. And this is where Ncats wants to provide additional supplemental funding to our awardees so they can, get to this key inflection point. Like for instance, say the small business needs a state-of-the-art complicated instrumentation or is filing an IND with the FDA. So in such cases, you can request up to about $1 million per year for up to 3 years. But the only caveat to the phase 2B is that Ncats should have funded your phase 2 project.
NIH, generally, not the quote customer quote. Consider partnering an exit strategy.
And then the last one is the phase 3, which is more of the commercialization aspect, right? So if you were to apply to other agencies, like say the DoD, phase 3 is where the agency would actually buy your product or technology. But NIH, and particularly at Ncats, we want the small businesses to think of an exit strategy and graduate out of the program. Next slide, please.
A table. First due date, September 5th. Scientific review, October or November. Council review, January or February. Award date open brace earliest close brace, March or April. Second due date, January 5th. Scientific review, February or March. Council review, May or June. Award date open brace earliest close brace, July.
So I just want to give you a quick timeline of this application process. If you're looking for quick money, this is probably not the best route to take. And that's because, say, let's pick the April 5th deadline, right? So applications are due by April 5th, and the peer review process happens sometime around June, July. And then we have an internal review at Ncats, which happens around August, when our council members actually look at the applications, and then they recommend the applications for further funding. And then the final notice of award is sent to the principal investigator from the grants management office sometime in late September or even December. So this could take anywhere from 6 months to about 8 months. So there is some waiting. It can be nerve-wracking, but this is something to keep in mind. So just wanted to make you aware of that timeline. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Will be SBIR Phase 2B Small Market Awards to accelerate the commercialization of technologies for heart, lung, blood, and sleep disorders and diseases. Open brace R44 Clinical Trial Optional Close Brace. SBIR, RFA 23008 Post November 16, 2021. Next deadline, February 28, 2022. Notice of Special Interest Open Brace NOSI Close Brace, Small Business Initiatives for Innovative Diagnostic Technology for Improving Outcomes for Maternal Health. NATB 21001 posted February 22, 2021. Next deadline, April 5, 2022. Technology for Improving Minority Health and Eliminating Health Disparities. SBIR, RFAMD 22003 Open Brace R41/R42. Clinical Trial Optional Close Brace posted, January 5, 2022. Next deadline, April 5, 2022. Innovations for Healthy Living, Improving Minority Health and Eliminating Health Disparities. SBIR, RFAMD 22004 Open Brace R43/R44, Clinical Trial Optional Close Brace. Posted January 5, 2022. Next deadline, April 5, 2022. Development of highly innovative tools and technology for analysis of single cells. SBIR, PA 20047 Open Brace R43/R44 Clinical Trial Not Allowed Close Brace. STTR, PA 20025 Open Brace R41/R42 Clinical Trial Not Allowed Close Brace.
In this slide, I just wanted to spotlight some of the targeted funding opportunities that we have available for small businesses that we are currently accepting applications for. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but please, I would encourage you to go to our website and familiarize yourself with these funding announcements. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. I believe this is my last slide, but before I hand it over to Dr. Richon, I do want to drive home the message that, the program officials here are here to, guide small businesses through this process. And we will be more than happy to have a conversation with you to even find out if your specific aims and your proposed work is in alignment with our research priorities and mission. And at the very least, we would refer you to our colleagues at other institutes whom we might think that your project could be of more interest to. So I really hope to talk to some of you very soon in the near future. And with that, I would like to have Dr. Alan Richon to talk about the peer review process. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Meena. And welcome everyone. I appreciate the fact that you all have taken time out of your day to come and hear what we have to offer you in terms of what the SBIR STTR program is all about. If you can give me the next slide, please. Okay, from the top, all of the slides that I have after this one will talk about what the mechanics of the process is. All of this is done for one reason, and that's to make sure that our review is consistent through every application. So each application, no matter what study section they go into, no matter where they're reviewed, will receive a fair, independent, expert, and timely review. And we want to make sure that it's free from any kind of conflict, any inappropriate influences, so that we make sure that NIH has the background to fund the most promising research. For the SBIR and STTR review, what we ask our reviewers to look at is, will the project have a sustained influence, not only on the research field, but also the marketplace involved? So if I can have the next slide, we'll start in taking a look at all of this. All right, from 10,000 feet, we look at an institution that has a great idea. Once they have gone through creating all of their records with the government, and that's the Small Business Association, SBA. So there's a whole bunch of things that you need to do before you even start this process in order to let the government know that you're real. So once all that's in place, you come up with an idea, you send your application in, and it will go into the system, and we'll talk about all this. It'll go to the Center for Scientific Review. We will do the peer review in our study sections. The results of those go to the Institute, where they also will conduct their own review. Now, there is kind of a hard line between the study section and the Institute. The study sections look at science. We do not discuss funding. The institutes take the background that we gave them and the information that we gave them on the science, and they are the ones that determine funding. I cannot tell you the number of questions I get from applicants about, well, where's the cutoff line? Am I going to be funded? And so on. And I have to tell them, I don't know, because I don't deal in that world. That is not anything I do. So the Institute will look at their programmatic issues and objectives, and they will make recommendations to their advisory board. The Institute director will then distribute the funds. So that's kind of the top view of how this process works. Now let's take a deeper dive into our study sections and review for the scientific content. Next slide, please. Okay, we get on average about 85,000 applications per year. We at CSR try and locate somewhere between 18 and 20,000 scientists who will participate as reviewers in the 13 to 1,500 review meetings that we run each year. Of those, about 7,500 are SBIR, STTR, and we have about 40 study sections within CSR that are dedicated to these reviews. You can figure out which one best fits your application by using the CSR assisted referral tool, and there's the URL to take a look at it.
https://art.csr.nih.gov.
So if you then use that tool, you can look at the assignment request form that is part of your submission package, your SF424 package, and suggest which study section that you feel is the most appropriate. You can also suggest an institute that you would like to see your application looked at. There is also the piece that most people don't understand, which is you can use this form to request that certain individuals or certain companies not review your application because they're competitive. And we'll get into that in just a bit. Next slide, please. When you go through the application submission section, there are 2 or 3 different avenues, and one is assist, the other is grants.gov. You will assemble your package and send it off to the system to be checked. It will run through a preliminary check, make sure that the application has all the pieces, make sure that they are consistent, and so on. Once that process is complete, the application is sent into the ERA Commons site where you have approximately 2 days to check for errors. If you find errors, you can correct them. But after that 2-day window, your application is essentially frozen and sent to DRR in the state that it's in. DRR, the Division of Receipt and Referral, will then assign an institute and an review group to look at the application. They pre-screen the applications to make sure that they comply with all the rules, regulations, font sizes, page sizes, and all of that. Once they have finished their review, they will send it off to the IRG chief or integrated review group chief, who will assign the application to study sections. So we got basically, and then the SRO will make sure that it fits their study section. They'll notify the applicants, that's you, that they have the application. You have a chance at that point to say, wait, I'm not comfortable with this. So there's some back and forth during this period between all of the divisions within NIH and you. And we finally get the thing set up and into the correct study section for review. Next slide, please. Okay, the referral officer is one of the people that you probably don't know a lot about, that is kind of in the background, making sure that the system kicks off correctly. This is a scientific review officer who has spent some time doing review, but they receive a significant amount of training in the art of referral. So they learn which institutes have the areas that might match your applications. They have the background to know which study sections have the best fit. They will be the ones that understand what all the rules and regulations are for each FOA or each program announcement. They will match all of that, make sure the application complies, and then set it forth. They work with the institutes and centers to make sure that the application's goals match NIH's goals, and they have the in-depth knowledge of each of our study sections. They have some input that you can provide them, and that's the assignment request form that I was just talking about. Here, you can ask for a particular study section. If it matches, there's a 90% plus chance that it will be assigned to your request. Occasionally, you'll see applications that come in where the PI is requesting a specific study section, but that study section only does R01s and R21s. And so it may not go to, for example, GGG, which is a standing study section for genomics. It may instead go to IMST 15, which is the small business equivalent. So they will take care of all of that, but you have the chance as a PI to request which study section you would like to have the application go to. You also have the chance to recommend, based on conversations with program officers, that there's an institute that you believe has an interest in what you're doing. At this point, you also have the chance to put together your list of companies and individuals who may be in conflict with your application. And when we get into the conflict, I'll go into a little bit more of that. Next slide, please. Okay. The scientific review officer is the designated federal official for the review of the applications and for the review process. We run under federal law that is defined by the Federal Advisory Committee Act of 1972. And there are several points in that law that define what it is that we have to do. We know that we have to have at least 3 reviewers look at every application. Those reviewers have to be in the room when the application is discussed. We are generally PhD level, MD level scientists with expertise related to the types of science that are reviewed in the study section. For SBIR, that means that we try and get people who have experience in small businesses, who have experience in commercializing products and so on. We also look at doing a level of review, basically a pre-cut for the applications to make sure that the applications match what is the scope of our particular study section. We do another check in terms of compliance to make sure that applications haven't been overstuffed, that each application is complying with the rules and regulations. They're doing similar types of things. So, phase 1 is a 6-page research plan. Phase 2 is a 12-page research plan with a 12-page commercialization plan, and so on. Once we have an idea of what is in our study section, so each SRO will look at every single application that comes into their study section. We will read it either fairly closely if it's something new to us. At least we will read through it fairly quickly to understand what science is being done. We then will recruit a panel based on the content of those applications. Now, this is where SBIR is different from the standard types of standing study sections. In a standing study section, you have a specific type of science which is being reviewed, and it doesn't change that radically from round to round. So you have a pretty good idea of what it is that's coming at you. In the SBIR world, each round is going to be different. There might be a different blend of science. There might be a different mix of phase 1, phase 2s. We really don't know from round to round. So that means that SBIR panels are special emphasis panels, or SEPs. And each round means that potentially we could have an entirely different panel depending on the content of the applications that come in. So we will then recruit reviewers based on what we have and make sure that those reviewers will give us the best review process for every application, make sure that the review is going to be consistent, follow all the rules, regulations, best practices. SROs are going to be your initial point of contact from the time that the application comes into NIH until you receive your final summary statement. Once the summary statement is released, you go back to your program officer and work with them. So a little bit of a difference there. Next slide, please.
All SBIR/STTR reviews are conducted by special emphasis panels, open brace SEPs, close brace. Expertise is recruited as needed to review the science proposed in the applications, so the reviewers selected will not necessarily be the same from round to round.
Okay. A lot of times we get questions, how do we find reviewers? We, as I said, recruit based on the expertise needed to look at the applications. We want people with demonstrated technical skills, scientific skills, market expertise, and people who are impartial. We preferably look for people who have experience in the SBIR program. So we want people with research support in the SBIR program, mostly small businesses or academicians who are starting small businesses. We also look for people who are senior in their career, so terminal, Ph.D., MD, mature judgment, breadth of perspective, upper level management in the companies, and so on. So, we try and find people who are the highest quality for the area that we're working in. Now, I say try and find because this is a volunteer effort. These are folks that agree to serve. They are the advantage that we give, at least when I was reviewing, the advantage to me when I came in as a reviewer was I was going to get to see a range of science that I wouldn't ordinarily see in my day job. And that was great. So, but everyone knows that they're busy. Everyone knows that they may not have the time. So frequently we will go out as SROs. We will put out a lot of invitations and build the panel with the group that accepts our invitations and comes in. Next slide, please. Okay, as you can imagine, when you look at an SBIR application, it is going to have a range of techniques. It's going to have a range of types of things that they're going to do. You have phase 1 applications, you have phase 2 applications, you have mixtures of both. So what we look for are reviewers that come from academia who can talk about the quality of the science. We look for people from industry who are experienced using the tools that are being developed. We look for small businesses because they have the experience in trying to get products out to market. And we also talk to tech transfer and VC investment firms so that they have the view of what kinds of paperwork they need to see to get further funding and really push this thing to market. We encourage all of our study sections to have 25% of the panel being made up of small business or other industry members. Keep in mind, though, we can invite. That doesn't mean that people are going to accept. So the goal is 25%. We also look for representation from underrepresented minorities, from women, from geographically diverse people. We also look for fresh perspectives. So, someone that has been working on a panel for 15 years is probably going to be a little bit, shall we say, stayed in their view. So we want to avoid excess service on a given panel. That generally means that reviewers are invited to serve for roughly 12 study sections. Now that can be spread over 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever. But at the end of that time, we try and rotate people off. So that's kind of a quick background of what we're looking at in terms of the types of people. I will put in a plug here to request that if you're interested in doing this, contact me as the SBIR coordinator. I am more than happy to send people who are interested in reviewing onto the study sections where they would be a good match. I also have a database that has roughly 10,000 people in it right now who are interested in doing SBIR, and we can do keyword searches on those people. So if you're interested and you would like to try it out, let me know, please. I think my email address is in this presentation somewhere. If not, I'll pop it up at some point in time. Next slide, please. The construct is pretty simple. It's alan.richon@nih.gov. So, okay, where do we find reviewers? Absolutely successful applicants. So we will look for, within our NIH databases, the types of people who would be submitting the applications in the study sections that we run, who have been funded at a phase 1, phase 2, and beyond level. There are several commercial products out there, including Dimensions, which allow searches based on keywords for patent documents. We also run LinkedIn keyword searches in groups. We do Google keyword searches. There are, as you know, regional incubator hubs where scientists are working to develop their products. We also have nonprofits. We have the academic technology transfer groups, professional societies, and like I said, volunteers from industry. So anywhere we can look to find reviewers, we're going to be searching in those locations to find the people that are qualified to look at the applications that we're reviewing. Next slide, please. All right, once the applications come in, the SRO's first role is to find the panels, which we've just talked about, and then figure out how they're going to take the pile of applications they have and assign them to the reviewers that they have recruited. Now, as I said, we are required by law to have 3 reviewers assigned to each application. In complex applications, we may have more. So it could be anywhere from 3 to 5 reviewers per application. We will match expertise of the panel members to the content of the applications, keeping in mind that each application is not dedicated to one particular thing. They may have an instrument that they are looking to do genomic sequencing with. For that type of application, you need someone that understands what the current state of the art is with genomic sequencing, someone who understands where the instrumentation is in that particular area, and then someone that might understand how to get the product to the next stage. So different types of expertise. 5 to 6 weeks before the meeting, we will assign the application to the reviewer pools, and they will be trained on what it is that we expect of them and try and match their view of what an application does to what we expect in the SBIR STTR program. And we will provide probably more training than anyone wants to know about. I mean, the slide deck that I have is 90-some slides, which is a bit much, I know, but it's easy to go through. But we do train all of our reviewers. If people have questions, we also offer them the ability to contact us at any time. We also, as a group, will look at the critiques as they post them to make sure that they match the kinds of things we're looking for, that the statements that they're making are not off the wall, just as a first level look before they're released to the panel and before they become part of the review process. Okay, next slide, please. One of the things that PIs will frequently ask about naturally is conflicts of interest. And that is one of the 3 areas that NIH really focuses on, that we spend a lot of time managing, that we spend a lot of time uncovering, and that we try and make sure we have as few as possible. So conflict of interest, confidentiality, and research misconduct are the three topics that we really hit on. For conflicts of interest, there are three levels that we can look at. You can let us know, as I said, that you have a problem with particular individuals or particular companies, and you use the assignment request form to do that when you're submitting your application. Now, please keep in mind that you don't get to say, I want to exclude all reviewers that have to do with zebrafish if you're submitting a zebrafish application, because obviously if that's the case, we can't find people who are knowledgeable enough to review the application. So while we encourage you to identify particular companies and particular individuals who might be a problem for you, don't go crazy. In addition to that, the rosters are published 30 days prior to the meeting. So please be on the lookout when you know you've been told when the meeting is. Roughly 30 days before that, you can look at the roster, and it's on the government website for the meeting. You can look at the roster, and if you see someone that you hadn't caught before that you know is going to be a problem, immediately contact the SRO and let them know about your concern. We will do everything that we can to manage the conflicts, and believe me, we take them all very seriously and try and take care of them before the review continues for too long. Okay, so that's the applicant's input to managing conflicts of interest. Next slide, please. So the SRO is going to be looking at a lot of different aspects. If reviewers come in who have a major role in any application that's in the meeting, they can't participate in the review because obviously they're going to bring way too much bias into the review to be useful. If there are letters of support in the application where the potential reviewer is going to be a major component of the scientific project, or if they're going to be providing some type of support and being compensated for it, then there's an issue there. If, however, the letter of support is generic, this is really great, I'm looking forward to seeing it, then it's a little bit different, and that while they might be excluded from reviewing the application, they are allowed to participate in the meeting. We do not allow people that are employed by the same organization to review applications from that organization. Now there's a three-year limit on that. So if they leave the organization 3-4 years later, an application comes in, that's not a problem. Co-authors on publications, collaborations, and so on, 3-year limit again. In this case, it's once again you can't review the application, but you can participate in the meeting. We do not allow members of any NIH advisory council to participate in review because that constitutes an undue influence. If an application is responding to a specific RFA as key personnel, even if the application is not part of the group that is being reviewed by this SRO, they can't be on the study section. All right, and then we have the whole issue of frequently serving panel members. So if a panel member has been in the particular IRG 4 times within the last 6 years, they submit an application to that study section, then they're going to be out of the meeting. So those are the kinds of things that the SRO worries about. They're the types of conflicts that are pretty well defined. You can find them doing searches, comparisons, and so on. Next slide, please.
NIH 21001 posted February 22, 2021. Next deadline, April 5, 2022. Technology for improving minority health and eliminating health disparities. SBIR, RFAMD 22003 open brace R41/R42, clinical trial optional close brace posted, January 5, 2022. Next deadline, April 5, 2022. Innovations for healthy living, improving minority health and eliminating health disparities. SBIR, RFAMD 22004 open brace R43/R44, clinical trial optional close brace. Posted January 5, 2022. Next deadline, April 5, 2022. Development of highly innovative tools and technology for analysis of single cells. SBIR, PA 20047 open brace R43/R44 clinical trial not allowed close brace. STTR, PA 20025 open brace R41/R42 clinical trial not allowed close brace. https://art.csr.nih.gov. All SBIR/STTR reviews are conducted by special emphasis panels open brace SCPs close brace. Expertise is recruited as needed to review the science proposed in the applications, so the reviewers selected will not necessarily be the same from round to round. Conflicts of interest. Financial interest in the company or in competing companies open brace including $5,000 in stock holdings close brace or consulting agreements of $10,000 or more. Financial benefits, institutional, family member, close friend. Academic scientists that hold patents for competing technologies. Reviewer's company has IP overlap with application. Patents or publications with any of the applicants.
Reviewers also have a part in this. They can identify applications where they do not feel comfortable because their work is in direct competition with the applicant's proposed work. So for example, let's say you're working on myocardial infarction and you have a particular gene structure that you're looking at that you think is important. If applications come in from that area, you're probably not going to want to review them because there's a potential down the road that through freedom of information, the company can say this person was on this grant application. They obviously understood what we were doing. They used it to further the research in their own company, and we're going to sue them. In order to avoid that, a lot of the companies will have their attorneys look at the types of applications and they will recommend to the reviewer what they can and can't look at. That's true for bigger companies. For smaller companies, it's the individuals, the reviewer. If they look at an application and we give you the chance before you see anything to look at the name of the institution, the reviewers, and the title of the project. If that sets alarm bells, you can talk to the SRO and say, okay, based on the conversation, I'm not comfortable reviewing this application, and we will put you in conflict. So there is, as I said, the three levels of removing or reducing conflicts of interest. Okay, so the next slide, please. And this is all before we've even turned applications over to people. So the kinds of conflicts that we're talking about are shown here: personal, professional, financial, institutional, personal biases, long-time disagreements, and so on. So those are the kinds of issues that we ask people to consider. Next slide. One of the things that we are very cognizant of is the whole issue of confidentiality. I mean, you as an applicant are turning over basically the jewels of your company to a group of people to look at and evaluate. As part of that, reviewers, before they are allowed to even see the list of applications, are required to complete ethics training. They are required to sign a confidentiality agreement before they read any application, and they are required to assert to NIH legally that they will keep all the materials confidential. And confidential means that they can't talk to their colleagues about them, they can't talk to their spouses, they can't talk to anyone. Any of the materials can only be reviewed by them. They can only discuss the applications in the review meeting, and they can only discuss issues with their SRO. So that's the first level. At the end of the review meeting, the reviewers must destroy or return any review-related materials. All the review meetings are closed to the public, so no one can listen in to the discussions, and reviewers don't get to discuss the review proceedings with anyone except the SRO, not even to the extent of going out in the hallway and talking about the 2 reviews that you did before with your colleagues before the meeting is reconvened. So it's really done basically in a bubble. You have a group of applications, you have a group of people, you get together, you discuss those, you come to conclusions, and that's the end of it. Everything else is done. One of the parts of that is that applicants are not permitted to communicate with any member of the study section about applications. They only can contact and discuss the application and what's going on with the SRO or with their program officer. Next slide, please. As I said, these are bound by laws of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. There are consequences for breaching confidentiality and COI. Reviewers are told that they are ad hoc advisors to the federal government, and that is a formal legal role. Rules and regulations are codified in FACA. They will legally certify lack of conflict of interest at 3 different stages of the review. The first stage is before they see the application. The second stage is once they've looked at the application. And the third stage is after the review to make sure that nothing is ticked their COI flag during a discussion of any of the applications. So 3 different documents that they sign legally attesting to the fact that they don't have a conflict in reviewing those applications. If it is found that there is a problem with any of that, they can be removed from study sections. Reviewers can be. They can be barred from future service. They can be barred from receiving federal funding, and cases can and have been referred to the Office of the Inspector General for prosecution. And some of those will appear in the notices that you see of legal action that NIH has taken. So we take this seriously. We have several systems that look into how to manage it, and there are consequences for violating it. All right, next slide, please. Okay, now let's get down to some nuts and bolts now that we've scared everyone to death. What is it that we tell reviewers to look for in SBIR applications? There are several things. First, SBIR is a mixture of science and product. So what we are asking people to look at is, what is the need for the product that's envisioned by the science that's being developed? Is there going to be something somewhere down the road, and it doesn't have to be this year, next year, but there has to be a vision for where this thing is going and how it's going to turn into a product that a marketplace is looking to spend money to support. How is the product going to change things? Will it improve practices over what's being done? Is it a first in class? Is it something that no one has thought of before? Is it, going to make life really interesting? One of the things that we really try to drive home to our reviewers is that you don't need to look at an application as being innovative because it is something that's brand new science. An innovative application in an SBIR world is something that takes known types of information and combines it in a unique way. Our example is with a drug. If you try and go to the FDA with something that is totally unknown, that has no basis in science, that is the first in class, it's going to take you much, much longer to convince them to consider it than if you are saying, here's a logical extension for how we're doing things, here's how it's going to change things, and here's the difference it's going to make to the world. So, it's not that we demand innovation from the pure science point of view, but it's from product developed as well. And this is consistent no matter what type of application you're coming in with. So for a phase 1 application where you're doing a feasibility study, yes, you're generating data that you are going to use to continue the development. But in that application, you've got to convince the reviewers that there is something there that's a nugget that will develop into something interesting and useful as a product later on. Phase 2, obviously, you've got to get closer to the marketplace. You have a 12-page commercialization plan that you can put together that tells the reviewer, here's our company, here's our plan, here's the market pull, here is the kind of emphasis it's going to make and change it's going to make, here's the amount of money we need to develop it, and here are the plans going forward. Next slide, please. So what are the issues that we commonly see that reviewers commonly point out? The top one is that there is a problem that's being addressed that is really of minor interest. It has an unconvincing case for how it's going to be developed into a commercial product. It doesn't have any chance of making an impact on the way practices are conducted or the market response to things. If there is an inadequate consideration of the scientific literature, so this is the rigor of prior research. what is it that you're basing your work on? Obviously, if you come into the SBIR program and you're going to be proposing that you're developing a time machine, there are very few people that are going to be interested in that. So you have to give us some kind of an indication that here is the foundation upon which my work is going to make a difference. If you have a lack of knowledge of the technologies in the marketplace, that's a killer. A lot of reviewers will say, well, you know, the software product that they're talking about here for doing variant calling is very interesting, but you know, there are 6 others out there already, and they don't talk about those at all. They don't compare to them. They haven't done any of the preliminary work. So I just don't accept that this is something that's going to go anywhere. That's a big problem. There should be a very firm foundation for what you're doing, as well as a reasonable approach to the experimental work that you're doing. You should have the problems, you know, potential problems outlined, alternative solutions outlined. And yes, I know you've only got 6 pages in a phase 1 to do this, but you can at least give a sentence or 2 that says, this is what we're after. And that's what reviewers are going to look for. Incomplete detail. Don't think that you can do a trust me, because believe me, the review panel doesn't. Expertise in the essential methodology. So when you're putting your bio sketches together, you haven't demonstrated that you know what you're doing in this particular area, or a member of your team does. So that's also very important. Weak milestones, lack of scientific rigor, unrealistic amount of work. A lot of times we will see an application come in that has 8 years of work crammed into 2 years. And the reviewers will look at it and say, I don't see how it is possible that this can be done. Therefore, there is no significance, and therefore the score is going to be dinged appropriately. So those are the kinds of big picture things that really derail an application. Next slide. Right. So those are the overview. Now, how about the nuts and bolts of it? The peer review system is guided by an SBIR STTR template that we have. It's linked on IAR to every application, and NIH, for better or worse, has decided our scale is 1 is exceptional and 9 is poor. So every 5 criteria, the significance, the quality of the investigators, the innovation, the approach, the environment, are all graded on a 1 through 9 scale. And then there are additional review criteria that consider, are you using human subjects? Do you consider biological variables? Have you taken care of biohazards? Do you treat animals humanely? If it's a resubmission, have you addressed some of the problems that were done in the previous review? So all of that goes into what is the overall impact. And as I have said, I hope it's sunk in a bit, is that the review process is focused not just on science, but on the product that will eventually come out. And each of the applications by the 3 reviewers will be given a preliminary overall impact score, and that will be loaded into the IAR system. Once we have all the scores for all the applications, these are rank ordered, and the top 50% of those scores will be discussed at a face-to-face or Zoom meeting, as the case may be at the current time. So top 50% of scores, accounting for any ties. So if there are 6 applications that scored a 4.3 and the cutoff line is 4.3, all 6 of those applications will be discussed. Next slide, please.
Managing the review meeting, setting the stage.
Okay. About a week before the meeting, all of these are uploaded into the system, and we try and put the order of review together. The SRO will check for missing information, for errors, mismatched scores and comments. I mean, it's not unusual that you're reading the comments and they're glowing and the scores are 8 and 9, and you know that a mistake has been made and that the reviewer has reversed the scoring scale. So you'll get in touch with them and say, there seems to be a problem here. We'll fix it and go on from there. Applications in the SBIR world are divided into 2 clusters. The phase 1 applications are in one group, and the phase 2 fast track direct to phase 2s are in a second cluster. the top scoring applications are within each cluster. So phase 1 are clustered, top 50% are discussed. We then move to the phase 2 fast tracks, 50% of those are discussed. All right, when we do the actual meeting though, we will randomize the score order for discussion so people don't get in a rut. One of the things that we found is that if you have all the really good ones at the beginning and all the mediocre ones in the middle, the review criteria subtly changes. So we try and mix and match so that everyone is looking at each application fresh, and the chair and the SRO will listen for changes in discussion tenor and make sure that the consistency is maintained throughout the entire discussion. Next slide, please.
Managing the review meeting. At the meeting, 15 to 20 minutes.
So how does this work at the meeting? The chair will announce the title and PI for the application that's going to be looked at. They will announce the conflicts. We will get them out of the room either virtually or physically. And then the reviewer names are announced and they will provide their initial scores. Now, there are 3 stages of scoring within application review. There is the preliminary overall impact score that the reviewer puts down based on their read of the application without any outside influence. The next one is at the meeting. They have had a week to read their colleagues' comments, and those comments may or may not make a difference in how they view the application. So at the point where the chair asks for the scores, they are given the option of changing their score. So second time, the third time is the final score, and that's down at the bottom here. So then reviewer 1 will summarize the application in a couple of sentences, list the major strengths and weaknesses that drove their score, talk about human subjects, inclusions, vertebrate animals, and so on. Reviewer 2 will then provide any new points or disagreements that are not covered by reviewer 1. If the rating is better, they focus on the strengths. If the rating is worse, they'll highlight differences in terms of weaknesses. Reviewer 3 does the same thing. Once that discussion has been presented, the application is open to the panel to ask questions, make comments, and discuss it. After that discussion, the chair will summarize and all of the panel is asked to score the application based on the discussion. Now, let me restate that. Every panel member will score every application that they're not in conflict with and every application that's discussed. So that's what comes out. All the assigned reviewers will restate their scores. The chair at the time when the scoring is opened up to the panel will ask if anyone disagrees with the way the discussion went. So let's say we have an application that scored 2 through 5. It might be that a reviewer has listened to the conversation and feels that the application is not as bad as presented or not as good as presented. They may feel that the scientific issues that were discussed are more important or less important. And for that reason, they can score out of range. We only ask that they state that they're scoring out of range so we know who it is and that the reason that they're doing so has been discussed. The reason for that is that if a reviewer has information that is pertinent to the review that changes what the review is, they should bring it up at the discussion and not keep it secret to themselves and score for that reason. Okay, next slide, please. I think we're just about at the end on these. Okay, so we have gone through what happens with the CSR, scientific review, how it is that the study section gets the applications, what it is that we do. The final take home on the last slide is I want everyone to understand that this is a process that, next slide, please, that has been put together over a very long period of time, has been worked on to make sure the applications are screened by several groups of people to ensure the best fit, that the policies and procedures and federal laws are followed and they are defining the process. Reviewers are selected, vetted, and trained. For the folks that don't do well at a study section, they won't be invited back. Conflicts are checked. We make sure that confidentiality is done, and we want to make sure that every application receives the same level of review with a uniformly applied set of rules, a uniformly set of expectations, and that we have several levels of checks and balances before the information goes to program for them to make their decision on where they're going and how they best fit their particular areas. And with that, I will be happy to answer questions. I'm sure we have a couple on the chat session.
Questions? Ncats.nih.gov/smallbusiness. ncatsfirst@mail.nih.gov.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for that thorough review. We have gotten some questions coming through, some that relate specifically to the CSR process and some that relate to general SBIR applications and STTR as well. So I'm going to focus first on the review process question. Is there an application process to become a reviewer?
There is not a process. It is more, if you are interested, contact me. I will initiate a phone call or a Zoom call with you and let you know what it is you're getting into, because it does take time. I mean, these things for a phase 2, you're looking at 4 or 5 hours of your time to look at an application, figure out what they're doing, and make comments on it. And you're going to be given anywhere between 6 and 9 applications. So, multiply that and you got a commitment of time, and we really appreciate that, but you need to understand it. Once you express interest, I will be happy to send you the slide deck in terms of what it is that reviewers look for, SROs look for from reviewers. And then you can also sign up for the early career reviewer database to volunteer to do a preliminary dive into a study section where you'll get a limited number of assignments. You'll see what it's all about, and you can decide if you want to continue.
Thank you. So we had someone who asked about how do we determine, which reviewers in the study roster are most appropriate to review a particular grant application. I think you covered that, but just to dig a little further, if someone feels like the reviewers identified may not be a right fit, is there a way that they can find that out, or can they make a specific request when they submit an application of what kind of reviewer they'd like to include?
You can submit in the assignment request form, ARF. You can request particular disciplines or expertise. There's a space in there to do that. And that will help the SRO guide the selection of their reviewers. You cannot suggest a specific person though. So you can't ask for your brother Tom to be the reviewer on your application. Sorry.
Thank you for that clarification. Much appreciated. So how can someone find the roster of members reviewing their application? Can you just give another review of that?
Yeah, the federal government publishes in the Federal Registry the list of all of the all the peer review meetings that are going on. And 30 days before the meeting, they will also publish the list that's on the roster list. So you can go and look at that. It's on the federal government site. If you just do a search in Google for example, I run the CRP review, the Commercialization Readiness Program. That's IMST 19. So you know that your application is in that list. Do a search in Google and request information on IMST 19.
Thank you. Do reviewers have a discussion to generate the preliminary overall impact score?
No, that is based on their review of the application. They are doing it in a vacuum, if you will. And we get the 3 reviewers, which is why we try and give a week before the actual meeting so they can look and see what each other has said. And that can then provide a means of modifying somewhat. But the first step is an independent review. So your expertise matched to that application and what you think of it based on your experience and your training.
How is that final impact score is determined? You're saying that they do that by themselves, and do you average them out? Looking across reviewers. Dr. Sean, you're on mute.
Not sure how that happened. Okay, so the first, there are three points in time where the review scores are done. The first is the reviewer who reads the application on their own, and that's the preliminary overall impact. So that's score 1. Those get uploaded to the system, and you can see the 3 scores. You can see what other reviewers have said. You can read their comments. You can decide that based on their comments, you maybe overlooked something, or you thought something was important, but it wasn't. Based on your read of theirs, you can, at the meeting, when scores are asked for the initial start of the discussion, you can change your score. So let's say you had a score of 5 when you did it by yourself. After reading the other 2 critiques, you look at it and say, oh, I didn't understand that it was doing this, this, this. My view of this application now is that it's a 3. And so the start of the discussion, your score will be a 3. Now, when the meeting's going on, you have input from the 3 reviewers, but you also have input from the entire panel. So there will be people on that panel that have expertise in that particular area. They just weren't assigned to the application. And they may have comments, questions, and critiques that will change the score again. And that is the final overall impact score. So the score that's reported back to the PI and to program, the final overall impact score, is the score of every person in the room during that discussion, averaged and multiplied by 10.
Thank you. There are a number of questions that I'll just summarize that relate to concerns about IP. And I know you did talk about that, in your discussion. Has there ever been an issue that, because we're seeing some questions about, has this ever happened? And if it does, what do you do when there's an IP breach?
I've been at NIH for 12 years, and I was in small business for 20 some years before that, both submitting applications, reviewing applications. I have not heard of a significant IP breach that resulted in a product being stolen or a area of research being stolen. I have heard of minor issues where someone comes back and says, wow, this statistical technique that was used in this particular application looks really interesting, and it might work for the kinds of data we're dealing with. So, that type of thing, yes, but for a major breach of intellectual property, no. As I said, the problem that you run into is that if you as a reviewer are looking at an application and can see that there's a major overlap, the people that have submitted the application do have legal recourse to come after you. And so by and large, reviewers are very careful about what it is that they will look at.
Wonderful. So what happens to the bottom 50% of the applications? Are they only read or seen by those 3 reviewers, and do they receive summary statements based on these?
They are only seen by the 3 reviewers. Summary statements are put together by the SRO for all of the applications submitted. So the applicants will see the 3 comments from the reviewers. The only thing that they will not see is the summary of the discussion, because they weren't discussed.
Thank you. And can you discuss the resubmission process or any tips that you have for folks on that? One particular question we also has is, if you are resubmitting, do you get the same reviewers so that they can see the changes that are made, or would they be different?
That's one of the problems or issues or features, if you will, of having a SEP. You're not guaranteed to see the same 3 reviewers because they may not be on the panel. So it is the mixture of who's available and the expertise that they have. We also don't retain assignments. So if, for example, you submitted something back in the May round of 2018 and you're now submitting it in the November round of 2020, we have no clue who was on that review panel, and we have no clue who was assigned to that application. So no, we can't guarantee you that the same people are going to see it. by and large, a review panel is going to look at how well you addressed the comments. One thing that really gets a panel is if an applicant comes in with a resubmission, and while it's okay to differ and disagree, some of the responses we get are really snarky, and those don't fly. So, I mean, no, I can't guarantee. The best thing to do is to reply with the NIH resubmission policy. Once you have an application that comes in, especially in the phase ones, you don't necessarily have to do a resubmission. You can take the feedback that is given to you and apply as a new application, as long as you don't refer to any previous application, any previous scores, and so on. So you can take the feedback, recraft your application, and send it in as a new dog.
Thank you. So we have a few more questions. We'll go to 2:15 Eastern, because I do see some good amount of folks who are weighing in. Next question is, can you clarify the timeline for when and how we can contact the referral officer if there are questions on the study section assignment after the application is submitted and prior to review?
The best bet is to contact the SRO. They will contact the referral officer and we'll hash things out. Like I said, your main contact from the time that application comes in until the summary statement is released is the SRO. They're going to know who to talk to. They're going to be the most efficient way to find things. And it'll save you a lot of time from calling in to a place and not knowing who to talk to.
Thank you. Considering that an applicant may want to submit more than one SBIR Phase 2 direct proposal, both leveraging an underlying proprietary technology, but for different applications, one for a particular disease state, another for a different disease state, are they likely to get the same study section for both submitted grants?
That is, okay, that's kind of a tough question because it's going to depend. If the underlying technology is the same, that technology will probably have been reviewed in one study section. If the disease focus is totally different, then the likelihood is that it will go to a study section that has that focus. So for example, if you have a genomics approach and in one area you're looking at cardiovascular disease, in another you're looking at neurodegenerative diseases, those are two totally different study sections. And so it would likely go to two different places. But if the focus of the application is more on the underlying technology, then it's going to go to the technology-oriented study section. So that's a long way of saying it depends.
Okay, thank you. The next set of questions will cross over potentially between you and perhaps Meena. So give your heads up, Meena. So if a platform technology has applications from multiple NIH institutes, does it make sense to apply for SBIR funding through Ncats instead of the disease-specific institute?
I think it depends. So you definitely want to talk to the program officer and also make sure that you don't duplicate your specific aims. You know, I would encourage them to talk to the program officers.
Is this question that they want to send one application in or they have multiple applications?
This is someone who has one application, but it could potentially apply to more than one institute. So you may want to speak to also how you designate primary and secondary.
That's one of the things that the DRR is really good at. They will take a look at it, and if there are multiple places, they will recommend a primary, secondary, tertiary, and even fourth level institute for funding. And so what that means to the applicant is that if one group runs out of money or can't fund it, then it can be referred to the second. And in some cases, they can horse trade and two institutes may fund it. It really goes all over the board.
Thank you. What additional information, components, or details are expected during the review of a Phase 2 application in comparison to a Phase 1 application? Is it simply a matter of stronger preliminary data?
No, not at all. The Phase 1 is, like I said, basically a feasibility study. And you don't need to worry that much about how you're going to get it to market. You don't need really specific plans. You've only got 6 pages. So you want to focus everything you can on why am I doing this and how are we going to do it. for a phase 2, a fast track, a direct phase 2, you have 12 pages of a research plan, but you've also got 12 pages of a commercialization plan. And in that, you need to explain how it is that this thing's going to become a product. What is it that makes it unique? Why are you the group to do it? What market are you going after? So those are the kinds of things that reviewers look for in phase 2s, fast tracks, and direct phase 2s. It's not just the science.
Thank you. If a company speaks with one institute and gets confirmation for a budgetary waiver, and the proposal is submitted, but then suggested for the most relevant study section, how does the company navigate if the proposal is formally assigned to a different study section and institute, and the budget waiver for that institute has not been discussed?
Okay, we've got different things to worry about here. Institutes and study sections are totally separate. Institutes are going to be doing the funding discussions. They are going to decide how well an application matches what their objectives are. The study section is purely looking at what it is that's contained in that application as in terms of science, in terms of the quality of the arguments being made, and so on. So totally different arenas.
Thank you. For a phase 2 direct grant proposal, is it important to have both academic institute letters of support as well as some from industry?
Depends on what it is that you're trying to do. Who's your market? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Are you developing underlying science and therefore you need leaders in the field to comment that this is the direction to go? Those are the kinds of things you look at. I mean, one of the things that will help the most people in putting their applications together, they unfortunately are so close to what it is that they're doing that they have a whole lot of implicit answers to questions that would normally be asked. So they'll write things down and they think they understand what it is they're saying when in fact they're not clear at all. So when you do your application, give it to someone that doesn't have a vested interest, that can look at it and point to you and say, I don't understand what you're doing here. I don't understand what point you're trying to make. Where is this going to go? How's it going to help? And so on.
We're coming up on time. I have one more question to ask, but before that, I wanted to encourage everyone to please open the link for the feedback form and tell us how we did and what you'd like to hear about in the future. And please connect with us online. We'll include some of the contact information for our speakers today, as well as links to reach us if you'd like to get more information.
Connect with Ncats. Website, ncats.nih.gov. Facebook, facebook.com/ncats.nih.gov. LinkedIn, linkedin.com/comapni/nih_ncats/. Twitter, twitter.com/ncats_nih_gov. YouTube, youtube.com/user/ncatsmedia. E-newsletter, ncats.nih.gov/enews. Listserv, bit.ly/1still5w.
Now we have the last question. How do we improve the score in the approach section? I know that's a general question, but if you have any quick tips.
Look at your critiques and figure out what the overriding theme of the issues are. So, you've got 3 people that made comments. And if it was discussed, there's something in the discussion that was done too. Look at, is there any consistent theme throughout all 3? If there is, that's generally what it is that you should concentrate on, and you should look at how you go about improving that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you to our speakers for all of the insights you've applied. As I mentioned, this is a touch point. You are welcome to stay in touch with us. We are including emails for our speakers. And if you want to learn more about specifics on what Ncats, SBIR, and STTR funds, if you're interested in applying, we do encourage you to set up a one-on-one meeting. Again, we'll put that email in chat. Thank you again. This presentation will be made available. If you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to us. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Monique. Nice job.
Thank you very much. Well done.
Enjoyed working with you.